She has been part of State Startup Policy Committee, Skill Policy Committee at Maharashtra and with Government of India. She works as convener Task Force Globalization of Higher Education, Government of Maharashtra. Invited member of Cluster University Act, she has led Government of Maharashtra flagship agreements with Government of New Zealand, French Embassy and Enterprises Ireland. She has been awarded the prestigious Ravi J. Mathai Fellow Award and Higher Education Leader Award by Higher Education Forum. She has worked on projects with UNECOSOC Council, IFAD, Rome and United Nations Procurement Division. She has authored more than 5 books in marketing, management and social media marketing, published more than 35 research papers in referred journals. A teacher of marketing management, and that's where we'll get a lot of insights today for future consumers and developing markets post-COVID. And I'm very excited to understand this. Marketing management. Her interest is in innovative practices in business. She is, am I audible now? Am I clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay, because I just read that the voice was not clear. She is independent board member with Catalyst Tech and mentor for startup funds in the company. Board member at many educational institutes like GS, College Autonomous, SBS Ahmedabad, and on innovation boards of many colleges in the state. Thank you so much to Dr. Apoorva Palkar ma'am for joining us today, and looking forward to guide all the food industry cluster of Pune region and many startups who have joined from all over India. Thank you so much. I will also quickly introduce Smita Murthy ma'am, our today's moderator. She has extensive working experience in the fields of quality and food safety and has worked for a leading food and beverage company for over 20 years. She holds master's degree in microbiology and is passionate about food safety and spent over a decade auditing manufacturing and units globally for quality, food safety, environment safety, and safety standards. She also lead analytical services in India for a brief period for global beverage multinational company. Smita ma'am decided to pursue her career as an independent consultant since March 2018 and has been conducting training in HACCP and is also India representative for FSSC 22000. She also owns her pet-friendly Fat Labrador Cafe in Pune. I welcome you also, Smita ma'am, and request you to moderate today's session. Good morning once again to everyone, and looking forward for this vibrant session for landscape of food business, especially, and importance of innovation post-pandemic COVID-19. Thank you so much. Smita ma'am.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, you're audible.
Yeah. I think we'll wait for Dr. Palkar to start.
Okay.
Okay, sure. If it's a presentation, yes.
Okay, fine. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, all the participants. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you, Anandji, for such a nice, lovely introductions early this morning. Makes me feel very motivated. and I am not even 1% of what you spoke some time back. But it's always an honor to come to MCCI and honor to be with you, Anandji, personally, for whatever we've done in the past together with SPPU. You've been always very, very passionate about startups. You've always helped companies. Would like to put on record here that Anandji is also invested in some companies. He always gives businesses to our startups who are associated with SPPU. Let me now get on to the topic that we are here for. I also see in the participants profile a lot of my startups who have joined in today here. Welcome, kids. You are also here. Every day you've been listening to me consecutively for last 15 days. Probably this is the 16th day that we are all together. So we're going to be speaking on a very different topic today. And this is, my talk is oriented completely on the food industry. Though the topic says that the landscape of business and importance of innovation in pandemic, so COVID-19, I don't know, 1 minute, just, yes. So when we speak of, so that's the reason my first slide was on the food industry and then I go to the pandemic. I will try and give you a very candid picture of what is the realistically statistics available today and what lies ahead of us in future. I know we are in a state of mind with the outbreak of coronavirus worldwide, and we all have this one question in our mind, at the back of our mind: will we be able to sail through this crisis? We're all bombarded with a series of do's and don'ts, and our mind is busy guessing what will happen post the pandemic. The entire human community is in a state of flux, as it is very difficult to predict post lockdown what is going to continue and what is going to discontinue. Having said this, let me also give you a little understanding of how financial markets are moving. There is definitely a downtrend in the financial markets, which you and I are all witnessing. At the same time, we've seen that the governments worldwide, India included, are coming forward with packages and incentives. But my real take is that these incentives will only be sufficient for people to survive for next 3 to 4 months, maybe sail through. RBI, on one hand, has allowed moratorium on term loans. It has eased out working capital requirement facilities without an asset classification downgrades, which we are seeing around us. Having said this, let me orient my discussion towards the consumer. So today we will be speaking more from the shoes of the consumers, the psychology of the consumers, and what is likely to remain in the market and what is likely to die down. Now, this is a picture which I have drawn from Economist, and I know that this is a similar picture that we see in the bazaars and in the markets, vegetable markets in Pune, Mumbai, Nagpur, Solapur. You switch on the television and you have this kind of a scene where you're saying that I just don't want to get out of my house. I would just go down to get some supplies, and when you go to buy your supplies, you're flooded with people. So this is the kind of situation that we are all facing day in and day out. In spite of the fact that we know that we have to do social distancing. Why am I speaking about this? I will come to this in a little while. I'm going to be putting some analogy with some of the historical data. And there is some empirical data which will support on how behaviors have changed in the past. In World War II, I'm sure we have all read about it. There was an increased participation of workforce post the World War II because a lot of menfolk died in the World War. Now, there is a second analogy that we can draw from, and that analogy is of the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Now, after the terrorist attack, what was the shift and the change that we saw in people's behavior? And the shift and change was in terms of looking at the security and transportation, where increased security and surveillance became very important in the interest of collective security for a lot of people. We started accepting this. The third analogy in my discussion that I'm going to be pondering upon in few of my next slides is also about SARS in 2003, which happened, this was an outbreak that happened in China. Again, it led to a lot of change in the consumer behavior, where people were not wanting to meet each other because of this virus. And this led to what we actually see as a change in the buying habit of people in that country, which led to, the Alibabas and others of the world. So we're trying to understand how consumer behaviors change because of certain set of crises, because they get accustomed to certain kind of a behavior over a period of time. Now, how is the pattern and the trend in the society likely to change? And is it going to be impactful post-pandemic is what we need to see. Now, these are the few of my observations I feel are going to be very significant in times to come. Social isolation, as I see, at least for next 6 to 8 months to a year, will be a way of life for almost all of us. There will be a lot of isolation that people will go through. All this while, isolation was equal to loneliness. Because in my slide, as you can see, that they lacked a purpose, and therefore loneliness led to a lot of complication. But now loneliness is accompanied with a purpose for people to stay at home. This is going to continue for some time, but this is going to be a very, very costly affair for most of the business across the geographies and across various demographics that the businesses are likely to deal with. The second important change that's going to happen, which we've already seen, TCS has already made a declaration that 75% of the employees will continue to work from home even after the lockdown. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that we would have more number of higher earning people who would stay indoors, which means people will move out of their houses less, who are the people who have more disposable income. So this, I'm talking from the perspective of a food industry, which is also having a lot of implications with people who eat outside, the canteens, etc., etc. But at the same time, there is also a thought in India that not everything can be work from home. There are certain disciplines where people will actually move out, but these would not be very high skilled people. They will be low skilled people, probably the delivery boys, the drivers, the cleaners, the distribution system, the manufacturing workers, the manufacturing setup completely, the retail workers. So there will be both kinds of people, but one class of people is likely to stay indoors. This is one change that we are likely to see in the lifestyle and patterns of the people, which is very significant from any given set of an industry, especially if we are in the food industry. The third thing that I want to bring here is the race that's going to happen between supply and demand. But there is already a disruption in the global supply chain, which we are already seeing. There's a lot of social distancing that's happening, quarantine, which is leading to, and we are already seeing the movement of the laborers, which is already a talk in the country. It's a problem which is being sorted by most of the governments, where people want to go back to, so the workers, the labor class, which is from different states, is working in Maharashtra, Karnataka, want to go back to their own home state, UP, Bihar, etc. So this is going to be a scene for the manufacturing setup that they will have to deal with in times to come. If I have to make an analogy, so I'm again going to be making analogy in next 2-3 slides of the previous crisis. And the previous crisis, which was the Great Recession that we actually saw through in 2007 and 2009, where the supply shock was in the financial sector. So the money was not getting pumped in that particular shock. But here two things are going to happen. One is the economic disruption, and second also people, which is the labor disruption. And third is the psychography of the individuals to look at this given situation. While if I have to compare this with the war, World War II, where there was a lot of destruction that happened of the properties, and of course there was a loss of human labor, which was compensated with the women folk coming ahead. Now, what is the next change that is going to happen in the business? We are likely to see that there are a lot of businesses that are dependent on cash, and these businesses which are dependent on cash account for a lot of employment in this country. Here there is a statistics which has been put forth by McKinsey, and this statistics very clearly says that asset ratio, cash flow to asset ratio of 0.5 and above are the people who contribute to 10% of the employment in the private business. And in the country, we have 60% of the total employment which is in the private businesses, of which 10% are in the area which is cash flow dependent. And this sector will be greatly impacted, and therefore the consumers in this category, who are the people who are going to be buying the food commodities, is something that we need to think upon and ponder upon. So we need to understand how consumption patterns are going to change in times to come. Now, having spoken about the employability, let me also try and bring in one important aspect. Liquidity is going to be a major factor which will lead to a lot of companies to close down. Now, demand and supply loop, which happened in the financial crisis, is similar to what we are seeing with this particular disease as well. But in terms of the World War II, where it was completely directed to the government, भाई आप building बनाओ, जितना destruction हुआ है वो उनकी responsibility थी. But this is a very different kind of a crisis that the whole world is undergoing. Now, this is also leading to something which is very prominent, and for everyone to understand that this is going to jeopardize the economic surplus. Now, when I say the economic surplus, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that there will be a definite wall that is going to be created between the demand and the supply. Now, what do I mean by this wall that is getting created between demand and supply? So what's happening is that there is contraction in supply. Supplies are not available. Because the supplies are not available, the human tendency of the consumers is that they contract their needs. And this is leading to contraction in the demand. Since there is a contraction in the demand, this again leads to contraction in the supply. So the loop together, the whole loop together is creating a larger destruction of the economic surplus in time. So we need to really understand that this demand and supply is going to be the key for the survival of a lot of businesses. We need to fight this out the way we have to, but we need to ensure that this equation is properly maintained. Now, in the state of uncertainty, what are the various things that are going in consumer's mind? The consumer is always under the fear of uncertainty of the disease. We really don't know how long this disease will be prevalent. When would be the time that this will be washed away from our region, from our state, from our country? So we are always in a state of flux as far as this disease is concerned. There are no concrete answers to this. This is one uncertainty that most of the consumers are living with. There is also uncertainty from the economic policies at this point in time. There is also a fear of people, the non-permanent workers, who are likely to lose jobs. There are pay cuts already. Most of the companies with salaries more than 50,000 per month have declared a pay cut of 25% to 50%. I heard one of the company even brought it down to 75% of the cut in the salary. We already are seeing that aviation industry has laid off people. 10% layoff has happened. 2 months they have been given a compulsory sabbatical. So with all the state of flux, what is happening in the consumer's mind? The consumer is looking at precautionary savings for the future is what they are focusing all their thought on. Firms are also very wary of investing till the liquidity position in the market improves. I'm not going to give you a negative presentation, but I'm giving you some facts, and then we will go to the essential industry like food industry, which also has a great ray of hope. In spite of all these negatives, this is one industry which is going to flourish, is what I sincerely feel. I also want to talk about the percentage of people who are regularly waged or salaried employees. There are 37% of them. 37% of the people come in this particular category who are non-agricultural workers and who have uncertain income at this point in time. There is also what has really happened is that the urban activities have come to a standstill. People are not going to the malls. The method of entertainment has completely changed. People sitting at home and watching a Netflix has become a norm. So this has led to fall in consumption of a lot of non-essential goods. The impact is going to be severe if domestic supply disruption caused by the lockdown is to be impacted. But we really need to look at the essential availability of the essential commodities, which still have a huge market because people will want to survive, and food is one very important thing that they really need. Post-pandemic, how will the economics be? We can actually see that the global recession is inevitable. This is going to happen even in emerging markets like India. One, because of uncertainty. Number two, because of the panics. Number three, because of the lockdown policy. Of course, it is important to have lockdowns, without which we cannot solve the problem. And India has been really proactive in doing so, and we've been able to curtail a lot of deaths. No two thoughts about it. Now, what is also going to happen is that there will be a large drop in demands because of all these particular factors, layoffs and so on and so forth. So economy is likely to enter into a depression. That goes without saying. Having said this, what should we be doing? Should we try to put our head in our hand and start looking at the economic figures? No. I'll just give you some very useful statistics from the food industry. I'm sure if you are coming from the sector, you already know about this statistics. The statistics is showing that the food and non-alcoholic beverages comprise of a very huge percentage. The percentage is as high as 23% in the human beings' expenditures. So in his frame of mind of his expenditure, he's doing 23% of the expenditure which is happening on food and non-alcoholic beverages in his daily consumption, which is really, really big. Now, how is the food sector? So we will now concentrate on the food sector. So food sector, how is the supply side going to be and how is the demand side going to be for the food sector? For the food sector, the price variation of key raw materials are likely to be secured, which we can actually see, except that there are certain variations in the interstate movement which are erratic. Also, there may be some changes because of the state policies on the transportation. Now, one thing that the food industry is greatly impacted with is the e-commerce. E-commerce is a big question mark. Having said this, edible oil prices may go down because of the demand supply in the worldwide market. Now, the other area in the food which is related industry is the agrochemical and fertilizers, which may be impacted because of the dependence on import for creation and also the export component. Fortunately, the production shutdown is not there in a lot of food production side, except some non-essentials like ice cream, etc., etc. But there are rules and regulations in the red zone, etc., which need to be followed. But they will definitely come out of it. That is not a great worrying factor for the food industry per se. Food industry, the cash flow constraints, as I mentioned to you, is that RBI stimulus is happening. E-commerce is one large constraint that I see. The supply chain disruption is a big challenge. Again, labor force, which I mentioned to you, because people are not available. Interstate labor is not going to be available. Imports, which we already spoke about, the edible oil and the agrochemical companies, which are going to face some issues because of the imports. Now, the lockdown restrictions will have an impact on e-commerce, will have some important impact on the agri-inputs. Greatly, the consumer sentiments. Let me tell you, the industry will be driven completely by consumer sentiments. One is the supply chain. How do you reach your produce to the consumers, and how does a consumer feel, and does he really want to buy your product? Is going to be the key factor for the success of a lot of food companies. Exports, and there is a shift that's happening. People are really not looking at seafood, meat, etc., etc. People are more moving towards the vegetarian food. Exports, to a large extent, we see that seafood, meat, rice, tea, spices, which were going to different countries like Europe, China, etc., will have an impact, but the rest of them are likely not to have an impact. Now, this was the landscape of food processing and food exports as far as the country is concerned. Now, let me get to the positive side of the presentation. Where are the opportunities in the food industry? I see that there are large amount of opportunities that exist in tasty, convenient, nutritious home meals. Home meals is something that people are definitely relishing. Last 45, 46 days of people being indoors, we see everyone's Facebook is flooded with a lot of new recipes that people are wanting to explore doing it at home. So they want to bring in the flavor of the restaurant at home. So this is becoming the new norm for a lot of people. So I see that this demand is likely to remain in the market. There is also a demand for easy to prepare meals, also something that people are really looking at. But let me tell you very clearly, people have become very cautious about the visibility of sourcing of the product and safety measures. Especially, we have seen some dairy companies coming out and speaking about how hygienically they have processed the milk. And this will become a norm in the society where people are very finicky about their health. And this will be the prime thing in the minds of the consumers when they are making any decisions to buy a food item. There is great potential for vegetarian food as opposed to non-vegetarian food, which is happening worldwide. This is going to happen. I don't know whether we should thank one or whatever, but because of the fish thing that has happened, it's not proven till date, but still people are now averse to non-vegetarian food. Health and food supporting wellness. Let me clarify here that wellness and immunity are becoming a top priority in food habits for people. People are also in the supply chain side, people are trying to catch up on the online buying. We have seen that a lot of smart cities, I've heard of a city like Indore, which has come out with an app called INDOOR, Indore. So every city has come out with their own app where online buying is becoming a norm. There is a, as I said, there is a concern for safety, and there has been erratic increase in the purchases of grocery and pharmaceutical in the lockdown period. This is a sudden shift in the purchasing patterns of people. So people's purchasing patterns are changing, and this is becoming a very essential thing for everyone's buying list. If you ask me in last 1 month, what is the shopping that I've done? It's only been grocery and vegetables. Besides that, I have not opened my purse to buy anything in the whole month. And people like me, when I speak to a lot of my friends and peers and from industry, everyone is talking about the same thing. So what is the expenditure happening? The expenditure for most of the people, either in the EMI or only on the essential. But we're not saying that this is going to be a permanent phenomenon, but this is going to be a phenomenon where it will have a track and impact on the consumer behavior in times to come. So what are we trying to say? That these lasting shifts in consumption pattern, social attitudes are likely to continue in next few days. Now, what kind of consumers are we speaking about? So I would say that the category of the consumers, I will try to position them in 4 different categories. There are certain set of people who are temporarily postponing the purchases. There is second category which is completely accelerated, who want to consume everything, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा खरीद के रख लूँ. The third category is distributed consumption, जितना चाहिए उतना ही लाओ. And fourth are a new category altogether, new and more permanent patterns of consumption. So where they are now getting accustomed to new patterns of purchases, which may be the kind of food items that they purchase and buy, and the supply chain through which they are making these purchases is what is likely to happen. Having said this, I will try to put the consumer behaviors into 4 categories. These are people, so I will call them as cut deep, stay calm, carry on, save and stockpile, and hibernate and spend. So who are the cut deep kind of customers? These are the customers who are more than 45 years of age and have seen the biggest impact on the employment status. And these are the people who are deeply impacted by the whole system today. The second category is stay calm, carry on. These customers do not feel directly impacted by the pandemic and are not changing their spending habits. The spending habits are remaining constant. However, the deep cut, as per the KPMG survey, the deep cut category of consumers are a larger percentages of people. Now, the third category is save and stockpile, which means they're particularly concerned about their families and they are having a long-term outlook. And they are trying to spend more and more on groceries and less on clothing. So their whole concentration is only on getting things, which is the grocery. And the fourth category is hibernate and spend. These are typically the youth in the age group of 18 to 44, spendthrofts, where the consumers, the impact is not so much of the pandemic. So they're still continuing to be the spendthrofts. So these are the 4 distinct behaviors of consumers that are likely to emerge post the pandemic. Now, what is going to become important? What is it that the food companies should be looking at? The food companies should be concentrating on understanding where is the broader social shift that is happening in people's behavior and their attitudes. Now, it is also important to look at certain granular high frequency data which is available. It is a big surprise to a lot of us in the lockdown that there is a lot of payments that are happening through the e-format. Maybe a Google Pay, a credit card, debit card. So the food companies need to have an understanding of this kind of a data which will be able to give them the spending patterns. This study of spending pattern is going to be very, very essential and important in times to come. Now I come to the aspect of innovation. Now, I want to bring in a thought to everyone sitting here who is listening to this presentation here, that new ideas often emerge or are developed in response to extreme needs arising during a social crisis. It is very important for all of us to understand the consumer mind, understand what is going on in the mind of a consumer. How are his needs actually changing? Is there any shift in the patterns? Very significantly, if we try and look at some of the innovative consumers who have been buying our product, will give us a lot of insights to make changes and variations in the product. The product in the earlier form may not have great acceptability. But if we are really looking at disruptive changes to happen in our business, then disruptive formats of thinking have to come in the products, product features, in the product delivery, in the model, and also the positioning. So all these things are going to play a very significant role. The way in which you communicate about your product to your consumer is going to play a significant key role in the success of your product. The product is the same, the factory remains the same, produce remains the same, but certain tweaking of the product and certain changes that we try and drive into consumer insights will lead to the success of a large number of businesses. Let me tell you that pandemic and innovations have always brought in changes. I mean, today we're talking of the pandemic. The innovative disruptions that happened, you have examples of Airbnb and Uber, which shot up in popularity in the West during the subprime crisis when people said that no business can survive and no businesses can come in the market, was the time where we had Airbnb and Uber, which actually attacked into the needs of the consumers. And the need of the consumer at that point in time was, I don't want to spend too much money on a hotel. So can I subsidize my hotel stay? And this is where this product came into the market, where it led to the savings of a lot of companies. In a similar pattern, we had Uber, which was sharing a cab or a taxi, is again cost savings. So these were the two products which flourished during the financial crisis of 2008. What stops the startups? What stops the existing companies? What stops the multinational giants to have a similar kind of a thinking and try to bring in a change in their thinking patterns to drive innovation through a business model that will have large impact and acceptability of people at large? With that, I can come to the end of my presentation. I guess I've been able to finish it in about 40 minutes. So I'm happy to understand if there are any questions that people may have on whatever I spoke. I'm happy to take up questions. Or if Smita has any questions for me, I'm happy to answer a few of the questions and take them on this particular forum. Over to you, Smita.
Ma'am, thank you so much. This was really, really enlightening and something I guess all of us connected with the food industry wanted to hear. It gave a full story of where we are now and where we can be, and how innovations can be spurred in times of crisis. So thanks a lot. Looking at the chat box and trying to figure out if there are any questions that have come up here. But while I'm looking at the questions, ma'am, there's one thing I would like to ask you. You talked about the destruction of the economic surplus, and you said that's what needs to be managed, the supply and the demand thing that you showed us in the graph. So how does one, what are the things that you can do to manage this right now in this kind of situation we find ourselves in? Do you see anything that's being done concretely to manage this?
There are companies who are already, so it is more important to remain vigilant, is what I really feel, Smita, at this point in time. The food company, so as I said, this demand and supply, equation needs to be very successfully maintained, because once we see contraction in the demand, will have a great impact on the supplies, because at the end of the day, the number of players in the market will not remain constant. They're always going to enhance and going to be increasing. But if that demand goes to some other category of the product, so if there is a mental shift for the consumers to a different category of a product, it may be a great loss, because at the end of the day, there is a food appetite that everyone has. And that food appetite, if it gets a replacement by something else, today we already have people talking about Chinese food being made at home. So probably if there are companies which are only in the Indian space and have really not thought about it, I think that graph is something which is really touching to me in my heart as well. As in fact, in the past, I also worked in the newspaper industry for 5 years in a different capacity in education. But there also, we always used to have this discussion, and that discussion was the patterns of the consumers. If the newspaper is not delivered at home to your doorstep, you will not tend to buy a newspaper. So we are already seeing the change in the trend. A similar thing is happening also. So it's about the mental frame of mind of people in buyer behavior, where convenience becomes significant, safety becomes the second important thing, nutrition becomes the third important thing, taste becomes the fourth important thing. And variety is what we need to really keep bringing in, and we need to really put in a good equation of demand and supply, and allow not the demand to go down, because demand going down can be disastrous for a given set of a sector and a category in that given sector, because in the sector also there are various categories, so each category will have to kind of maintain its own momentum for them to survive, and need to be very vigilant about what competition is also doing, because everyone wants to be in the space currently. And whatever little strength that you have, most of the companies in that space will really have to ensure that they utilize the strength very effectively. Technology is going to be very, very important, So where people want to track completely the movement of the food items. So these are going to become very, very important. Blockchain is going to become very, very significant in the food industry in times to come.
And I guess as food industry also, the way we communicate with our customers will also become a key going forward in this crisis now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So,
okay, ma'am, I have a question here from Sujata Bhan. I think she says the coming times seem to be scary and so much uncertainty about complete change in the way of life. Will the food supplies continue to be scarce?
I don't think that the food supply today, that is the statistics, and I'm sure a lot of experts are sitting here who will agree with me that there is no scarcity of food supply as of now, and people are saying that we have enough to sustain ourselves for a year or so. It's just that the patterns. So the point that I'm trying to make here is, in uncertain times, it is going to be, what is it that the consumers are going to like, is what is going to be the key to the success of the food companies, because the survival of the humankind is on food. So it cannot happen that a country can survive with scarce food. There may be cyclic changes in some of the food items, but irrespective of that, I don't think that any country can survive with the scarce food supply.
Correct. There's also a question here, and I think you also touched upon it in your presentation. Will there be a less demand for meat products? I guess you did talk about vegetarian food going up, and yes.
Absolutely, and I'm not sure whether it's the right statement to make for people who are in the poultry industry and the other processed industry, meat industry. But I guess they will have to look through a proper communication channel to ensure that they reach out to the customer on the safety aspect of the product. So I guess that is going to be a big challenge for them, and they will have to reinvent their thinking process. They'll have to put in their thinking caps, and will have to make the right communication and to reach out to their ultimate consumers. And having said this, there is a chunk of the customer who is so hooked to the product that the likelihood that they will diminish from the market is not going to happen. There are, as I said, there are 4 different categories of customers. The 4th category of the customer doesn't care. I mean, I don't care about my health. I don't care for anything. I'm a youth. So that category will always exist, but that doesn't mean that people have to bring in a trash product in the market. Safety measures and health measures are going to be very, very significant in their communication piece to the ultimate consumers, is what I see.
Correct. There is also a question, I think, from Anand himself on, do you have any insights on the agriculture sector, APMC markets, corporate farming going forward?
What is this? Can you get some insights on agriculture sector, APMC market, Apoorva? I think they have a huge kind of a future in times to come, because more and more people will want to have, I mean, if given a choice, I just heard my mother tell my sister, we have a huge,
I think, can everyone please, other than the speaker, mute their phones? We can hear a lot of background noise.
So I'm sure a lot of corporates are going to be getting into, I mean, a lot of people are going to come together on corporate farming, and this is going to be more prominent for people to have an access to whatever is grown and what is brought to their homes. And there will be a lot of shifts that we're likely to see with a lot of people who have disposable incomes to get into these areas, because this is becoming very prominent for a lot of people and for the survival of the humankind. So I guess this is an immense future in times to come.
Ma'am, just one quick thing. You also talked about, product features and delivery. That's what's going to play a key role when we look at innovation now post COVID-19. So can you talk a little more on that? I guess it would be.
I think post, the lockdown period, there is there are a lot of talks which are happening on the retail space. So people are now really jittery. I don't know when it opens. In Pune, it is still closed. But in times to come, in the other economies where we are seeing, in some parts of Europe, in some parts of China, which have just opened up, people are really ready to go to a mall because there is so much of touch. On a trolley, there is a touch. Then there are so many touch points. There are so many points where you are actually interacting with people. So this is something which is going to have certain impact even on the Indian consumers as well. And I am seeing that there will be a great growth of online selling and e-commerce, which is likely to be the norm for supply chain in times to come. And home delivery, which is something very, very significant and important, is something which is likely to stay. Of course, there will be question marks on the delivery boys, which is also needs to be thought of by the companies who are into that supply chain. So this is the shift and the change that is likely to happen in times to come in the delivery. So this is definitely going to stay for a while. I don't think this will go away in next 1 or 2 months. Next 6 months till December, I think that, and in about 6 to 8 months, if a consumer gets used to something, then it becomes a habit for him. So once it becomes a habit, it is difficult to change that. That doesn't mean that malls are going to close down, but malls will always have some limitation in next 5. So there has to be a change in the model of delivery of the product. Number 2, as I said, the packaging in the food industry will play a very significant role. What is written on the packaging in terms of the safety standards, etc., will play a significant role. Third, social media can play a very significant role. where the food companies can reach out to the ultimate consumers using the social media, to the mass market, or to the ultimate consumer through right kind of the channel. Advertising, of course, will be there, but right kind of communication to the consumers about the quality, safety, and attributes of the product is going to be very, very, very significant.
Correct. There's one more question. I think couple of them. They're talking about maintaining. Would there be databases and data that so I have a comment from Vinay Oswal talking about maintaining databases by Commerce Ministry that would help people in the food industry with data and numbers. Do you have anything to add on, data driven?
Vinay is an authority on that subject. I shouldn't speak when Vinay says something. So Vinay, I'm happy that you have joined the session. I guess, yes, what you said is extremely correct. There are many databases by the Commerce Ministry. And it is very important that even small food companies should have access to these databases and make use of this market intelligence to make the early changes. And if they have a problem and issue sourcing the data because of the funds and finances, my sincere request is that small food companies should join together and co-create this whole ecosystem, and help each other. But this is the right time for like-minded companies who are non-competing companies. 10 or 15 companies should come together and make a kind of whatever the format that they may think is appropriate, and make use of such kind of data and market intelligence to develop their business strategies, to develop their marketing strategies, to develop their communication strategies, to develop their supply chain. And this is how things will happen for small players. Small players are going to find this as a very, very difficult piece, and it's going to be very, very strenuous for a set of people.
So I guess this is also where MCCIA can look at helping set up something like this, I guess.
Absolutely. You all can come forward. And
I think it's a great suggestion, and I am taking this thought ahead, and we'll do some constructive work around this one.
Okay, Anand has another question.
Yeah, there is also one on self-help groups, so it says what opportunities would be there for, food processed by self-help groups. Again, I think it comes back to your point that all small businesses probably need to come together.
Yeah, there could be multiple. That's what I said. Non-competing businesses can come together. So there's always a possibility of creating the complete value chain of non-competing businesses. And I've been talking about it, that if such non-competing businesses can come together where each adds value to the other one and completes the value chain, then probably they are in a position to reach out to the market with a stronger, so there has to be a rebound with which they have to go back to the market, with all the constraints of labor, cash, etc. But this can actually be surpassed provided 10, 15, 20 like-minded people and who know that one can support the business of the second, and they co-create and co-grow is what is going to be helpful in times to come.
Correct.
And even bigger manufacturers have to come forward and look at these smaller players and try and see how they could support in manufacturing. If there are new ideas that are coming from the startups who have developed some set of, the product features, additions, etc. Probably big manufacturers can handhold them and take them in their fold, and probably this will be a win-win thing. Because I always feel that the way in which a youth can think, a 22, 23, 24-year-old can think without any biases is not something that I can think at maybe at 52 years of age. I'm so rigid with my experience. I always feel that this is not going to happen, this will not happen, that will not happen. But when they come with that mindset, there's a lot of times innovations, models, product features actually come by, which we may have not even thought about. So not discounting on the startup ecosystem, if large manufacturers can bring in a pool of small startups together and handhold them, could be a win-win for the manufacturer as well as big player as well as to the small.
Ma'am, just one more question. I think this is from Madhuri Gachaya on opportunities for non-alcoholic beverages. What do you think about that post-pandemic?
Again, as I said, nutrition will play a very significant role. People are more concerned on what is it that they're consuming today. So on one side, if someone is saying that, nimbu pani piyo, so aaj everyone is going in the market only looking for a nimbu, and a small nimbu is costing some 7 rupees, 8 rupees, 10 rupees, one nimbu. So it's all driven by what is the communication going in the mass media. So television is playing a very significant role where they're driving this. So probably the nutrition element and the element of non-alcoholic drinks will be very, very significant in times to come. That
And
is my understanding.
yeah, ma'am, one more thing. As you run the startup center at the Pune University, how could your department help people if they need more information? Is there something that they can contact you, reach out to you for help, information?
So we are open 365 days, 24/7. We are all the time connected to the startup ecosystem. We invite people. Generally, we do not do any program which is a charged program, being a public university. We try and do as much as we can do for people at large. We are very happy to have people who have some technological innovations to come and reach out to us. And we have startup clubs. We do, in fact, for last 15 days, we've been running webinars on various aspects of startups. We help and support people in whatever capacity we can, handhold them. And fortunately, we've had a lot of people who have come forward to help and support the center. The center is very open to any startup who may want to come. We have virtual incubation. We have actually properly. I will not get into what we do. You can go to my website and you'll know more about what we do. So this is not a platform to talk about.
Okay. Do we have some more time, or Anand, would you like to?
Yeah. Though I think some people have questions, so if we can take a couple of more questions, if ma'am is okay, since everyone is together and we're getting good insight. So if we can have, and after that we want to have some MCCI would like to have a slide which will come up for the some feedbacks and ratings.
Okay. So I guess there is one more question. Again, I think ma'am has answered this through her presentation, but the question is, how is the situation and how will it impact on the healthcare segment? I'm not sure it comes in right with our food.
Healthcare segment is the biggest priority for people. So maybe if we have to relate to the food industry, the healthcare related to what you consume and what you eat, and healthy eating, wellness, this is of prime importance to everyone. I think this has a huge future in time. People have suddenly become very health conscious. So which was not the norm some time back, but people have become very wary to any kind of an illness. So people are very vigilant about the illness. I don't know whether they are conscious about their weight, but they are very vigilant about the illness. So any small trigger is something that they look at it very, very seriously in the current pandemic. So this is the shift in the mindset of people that we can actually see.
Ma'am, just one question. A lot of the food industry used to be dependent on like one country getting a lot of raw materials that came from China, for example, packaging material, raw material. Now with all this happening, with all the bans, lockdowns, travel not happening, how do you think that will entirely play out? This whole dependency on one country, or how do you think that's going to play out?
We're already talking about shift that is likely to happen in India is what people are saying, but this is only post lockdown that we will really know some of the dependencies that the world had on China. This is a world problem, which is not only India's problem, but it's a world problem where the dependency on China was very, very high. But there is a likelihood and shift which may happen to other countries. I'm not saying that India alone, but this might happen and get assorted into different countries, because over dependence on one country is something that people have realized, which has impacted the world financial market, which has impacted the lives of people across the whole world. So probably there's a huge lesson that the world has learned from this pandemic, And I'm sure the correction is likely to happen in the markets in times to come. The world is very smart, very fast to make this changes.
I guess there's one last question from Akshay Khandekar on how restaurant businesses will get affected in the post-COVID period and what changes should they have to make.
Hey Akshay, Akshay is with me. So we have not touched deliberately on the restaurants today because we were more concentrating today on the manufacturers of the food industry. We've touched a little on the retailers, but since you've asked the question, we know that this impact will be very, very high on the restaurants where people actually going and dining out will reduce, but that doesn't mean that they will close shops, because we have a lot of people on the cloud kitchen. People are already there, their home deliveries. And again, the safety measures will become very, very significant as to how are you cooking the food and what quality standards have you maintained, what kind of brand equity that you actually have created in the long run for your own brand, because you can't do this overnight in one day for you to survive in the market. New players may find it difficult. Anyone who enters into the market at this point in time has to be very vigilant about the hygiene factors, and probably sit down and dining out is something that will take a back seat for next few months. Even as I said, people will be ready to go to a restaurant, even in a mall, will be ready to go to a restaurant in a multiplex. So or canteen, workplace canteens. So all these things are going to be impacted big time. But again, as I said, they will have to play smart, innovative to ensure that they remain in the business.
Okay, I think, ma'am, this was a fantastic presentation and I think useful for all of us. I'm going to hand it over to MCCIA and Anand Chodia to take the session further. I think we've already run out of time.
No, I think by far this was one of the best sessions we had, and it was so relevant to food industry and great insights built today, I'm sure, for everyone on the way different types of consumers and consumerism is getting merged in food industry, and also some data of past such pandemics or situations like warfares was explained so well, and I'm certainly seeing the shift already happening in a big way in food industry. Apoorva ma'am, we would like to have another session sometime soon on some topic, and one special session I like to have on restaurants and canteens, because we have a separate membership and a number of people in that category as our members, and we are doing a lot of work with FSSAI with these canteens and restaurants in Pune and around area. So I'll plan that maybe in a couple of weeks time, and we will have another session. Thank you so much everyone for coming here enthusiastically, participating, and the poll result shows how useful it was, certainly for everyone in a very big way. I have Subodh Jindal sir here, and who is president of all in All India Food Processors Association. He's from Delhi. I'll quickly introduce him to Palkar ma'am also. And sir, any news if we can quickly get from ministry updates on food industry will be great. Okay, there is, before I take it to, there is a feedback which we will like all of you to submit. It has popped up on a screen, so I'll request everyone to definitely give the feedback.
Anand, we did not do Facebook Live, looks like. We could have more number of people with a Facebook Live.
Great.
Those.
Jindal sir, to you. Chamber, if you can unmute Subodh Jindal sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Anandji, and most grateful to Dr. Apoorva Palkar. I think discussions like this are actually very invigorating and taking the collective mind further to adopt new methods and systems which can help us recover faster from the crisis and then later on grow more. As far as the Ministry of Food Processing Industries is concerned, I can tell you we have been interacting with them on a daily basis. The Honorable Minister and her entire team is very proactive, and all suggestions that we have given, wherever we could collect from all over India regions, all the processing industry cluster points have been very well received and forwarded also to the PMO, the Finance Ministry and Home Ministry. There have been a lot of problems for the operation of the sector, permissions for the units, passes for workers, the permits for transport. All these are being and have been resolved to a great extent. The next thing that is a big challenge is how to merge the activity with restaurants, hotels, canteens, particularly where tourism is being served, so that that particular sector of our economy also gets back on the track as soon as possible. Though the only apprehension there is that in this sector, large number of people get to work and sit together, which probably needs to be systematized so that distancing and safety and security is taken care of. The only last thing which is still pending with the government amongst our requests is some kind of a wage package for our workers, whichever sector they are, who have missed their work for more than a month now, how to sustain their lives. Industry is making effort from its own side, and number of units have paid their workers also, but we expect the government to do something on this. The next thing is that processing units and the food service sector also need some working capital support, because payments have not come from some time and are likely not to come for a few months till the entire financial liquidity cycle is set in motion. Now, these two requests of a wage package and a working capital support in terms of a loan, low interest with a long time frame for repayment, is, I think, what will help the sector to re-establish and boost. I'm grateful to you for inviting me and for the efforts and interactions MCCIA is making to support the sector. Thank you, Mr. Chaudia. Thank you very much, MSSA.
Thank you so much, Jindal sir. Thank you so much once again from all of us to Dr. Palkar and her words of great wisdom will definitely carve out great path for all industry friends here to take the COVID crisis in a positive and good spirit, especially definitely for food industry. And wish you all a great day ahead. And soon we'll see you all again on one of such webinars which food processing industry committee will definitely plan for food industry friends. We have got already some requests on some other topics which team MCCIA we will discuss later. Thank you so much once again. I am handing over to Shantanu sir.
Chaudia ji, before you do that, a very small suggestion.
Yes, sir.
Can I come in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, before you wind it up, I have a very small suggestion that you have made so much effort in the last, all this more than a month. And in this process, a number of learned, experienced, and thoughtful experts and speakers have come up. I think it will be worth the purpose of the industry and in their honor that we make a pool of such resource persons.
Sure.
You know, we have them in kind of identity, and then they will be able to guide the industry from time to time later on.
Sure,
Thank
sir.
you
We
very
will take up. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Once again, Shantanu-ji, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for such an enlightening session for you. Hope we will continue our journey in future also.
Thank you, Smita ma'am, for moderating the session so nicely. Thank you so much.